Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 7 p.m. service. Now, tonight we are launching Circles of Grace, and that's Pastor Mariana Crompton's very first book. It's a big moment. But she also recently turned 75 years old. I have her with me, Pastor Mariana Crompton. How are you this evening?
I'm fine, and it really sounds very old.
Now, I wanted to ask you, and I know it's a cliche question, but what is the best part to take away from being 75? And I said to you earlier, as women, we fight age. We fight it with everything we've got. But I want a different take. What is the best part of turning 75?
You've got nothing to prove,
You've got nothing to prove.
nothing to lose, and you can just actually enjoy life. I intend living till I die. I can't sit down and wait to die.
Absolutely. And I mean, we had such a wonderful celebration. And I think it's an honor to turn 75 and to have the wisdom of those years.
It really is, Tia. I understand, and to be, for me, I'm actually more healthier at 75 than I have been for a long time. I've just gone through a series of
I
operations,
know.
and I'm actually doing better than did 10 years ago.
Okay, and I just want to say you chose 75 years old to launch your very first book,
Yeah.
but you didn't start writing it recently. How old were you round about when you started writing this book?
I've always liked putting thoughts on paper. And then we went through a really crazy period in our life. It was challenging, very challenging. And I thought afterwards, and yeah, we were very public. We were in the newspapers.
And I want you to talk about that a little bit as well. But first, like looking back, because you were much younger, how many years ago do you guess did you start writing this? Because you had to look back at what that
Yeah.
younger version of yourself wrote. How did that feel?
Actually, a lot. I saw the immaturity when I read lots of that stuff, and I rewrote it. Can I just say, Tia, this has been a journey for me because I actually started to write it because, and then my husband wrote the book, but I'd actually put the chronicles down. I'd actually put everything down so that, because I felt like it needed to be, there needed to be order in the whole thing.
Okay.
So but can I say this book doesn't really cover all that. It is more my story and what I went through in it.
And when I was reading it, I can say it was definitely a different side of the coin. I read
Yes.
Pastor Jimmy's book, and then I've read yours, Pastor Mariana, and it was a completely different take
Yeah.
on the same event. And that's because it's two different people
It's very different.
with different roles in it. And I think when I describe the book, I say, this is a story about very public battles in ministry. And I think, and then I also say it's also about miracles, seeing miracles. It's about victories, but it's also about motherhood. And in the middle of those battles, and about romance, a side
Yeah.
that we didn't see of Pastor Jimmy. But let's start with the battles, the very public battles.
Yeah, that was hard. But I think the hardest thing was watching my husband get so battered. I was actually there, and they put me on photos and,
Yeah, in the
whatever happened
newspapers.
to him happened to me. But it happened to my son.
And that was the hardest.
I think that probably was the hardest for me. I think that, just watching my little boy. He was 11.
A lot of people watching might not know what this battle was about. Can you give us a brief overview and how that affected Richard, your son?
Yeah. We were in a very legalistic denomination, and many of you won't even understand it. And I'm so glad that there's a season that's passed, a very legalistic season where it was funny. It was it was about dress
The
and
hats
and it was in apartheid years, girl.
Yes.
And so our church today was taboo.
There wasn't anything
There
like
wasn't.
this. There weren't multiracial
No.
churches. You couldn't come to church dressed as you please, basically.
Oh no, you dressed up to come to church. You never were not dressed up.
And what was the reason for the battle that ensued after that?
You see, Very short.
Yes.
My husband's father was in the committee that started and wrote the Constitution, and they said that 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 your building was yours. And we could no longer stay in the denomination we were in. We just couldn't. It was, they were controlling. They didn't want us to have people of color in the church. They took my husband to a church board because our youth pastor played piano without a jacket on. That is how ridiculous it had become. And so how can you stay in a denomination like that?
And did your son witness some of these things?
He saw everything, you know. I mean, Richard must have been 9, 10. He was 11 when it really broke. He was a boy.
And then, because of this, you lost everything. Just
I did.
about everything.
I did.
Tell us about that, leaving that denomination to which you belong to, and then losing everything.
Can I say this to you? I think that I listened to Richard this morning. And if you didn't listen to this morning's sermon, listen to it. It was excellent. And he spoke about breaking the spirit of poverty. And we had come out of where that was the thing that held you was that spirit of poverty.
And you would actually commit to, you were saying...
Well, I didn't do, we didn't do that, but it
sort
was something that was across the whole church.
Yeah.
But the Pentecostal denominations really did. And so it was before there was the freedom charismatic move, you know, and so and so people like Kim Clement and Rodney Howard-Browne and even Edward Trout were boys in my house.
Teenagers.
Well, yes, teenagers,
just
and
after.
no. Rodney was probably in high school,
Oh, wow.
and Edward was 15 when he was around, and my mother-in-law had a big hand in his life, by the way. But that was before we came here. So I'd watched all these people, and then Kim came, and he came into ministry in our church. And he became the youth pastor. And then he met Jane, and it was finished, and he went off to Durban because he'd fallen in love. Yes. And there he came across the message of faith, being free from poverty, a mentality of poverty. And we started to mix with people who had come out of this stronghold of poverty and started to see a big God. You see, I serve a big God, and he wants to actually spoil me. He loves me. But as I give to him, and as I give myself to him, I live my life generously. I love what Tess spoke about this week, about living our lives generously. And it doesn't have to be just money. You know, we get this thing about money. And it's when we have the thing about money, we have a poverty mentality. Can I just say?
And when you speak about poverty, that also played a role when you met your husband, and he was a pastor.
Yes. Well, they'd come out of that, and they felt it was right. And when we first embraced the faith message, we weren't popular in the family for a while there. But they embraced it, and they've seen the goodness of God.
And you didn't stay there. You lost everything, but God brought you through.
But that was the amazing part. So when I lost it, and they came and took the furniture, and it ended up on the back stoop of Cully and Dorothy's house, because they stayed up the road. We just took it up there. And I sat down, and I found a hat, because that was one of the secret things. And I put the hat on my head. And I sat on top of my furniture. It looked terrible. It was just strewn over the back. It wasn't, because we just moved quickly. Yeah. And I sat on top of that furniture, and I laughed. I laughed. I laughed until I cried. And I thought, devil, if this is the best you could do, you've jolly well lost. Because I didn't see lack. I knew God was going to come through. I expected God to do a miracle. And I thought, well, if he's done this, then he's got a better plan.
And you've seen that again and again. And I
And
don't want
that's
to
how I've
actually
lived
come
my
away. I
life.
know we want to tell people that that battle turned around, and it did turn around.
It
And you
did
talk
turn
about it in your
around
book.
amazingly. This is why we
Yes.
sit in this building
But
today.
you've seen that so many times. And I think one of the things in the book that stood out for me, and a lot of people don't know this, is that you've been shot. You have been shot.
Oh, well, the year after Jimmy died was very interesting.
It was.
It was like, just one club after the next club, after the next club, after the next club. And because I had a very, very deep knowing that God had my back. It didn't matter. He was going to turn this around for the good. I remember that day,
Yes.
night, Ruth and I, absolutely, I laughed.
Again.
I
Because
do.
the
I
whole-
laughed
it was-
every
you
time.
were
When the
shot in
car
the
went into
leg.
my house, I laughed. When I lay on the floor that night, and Ruth says to me, Mariana, there's a hole, and there's another hole, and I suddenly thought, no, this is ridiculous. I knew I wasn't hurt. I
Okay.
knew that I was okay. I could move my leg. I could move everything. I knew that if there was I'd been shot, it was okay. I was going to get over this one, and that somehow, in the middle of it all, God was going to turn it around. Well, I want you to know, I stay in a place now with the best security,
Okay.
and it was provided for
That's
from
amazing.
outside of any of the.
Wow, that is amazing.
And I've just seen God turn everything around.
Why do you think that that specific night the devil wanted to take you out?
Oh, that was quite a scary thing, because for 3 weeks before that, you know how you know you're in a spiritual battle? And I knew I was. And in my head, there was a voice saying, I'm going to take you out. And it's going to be the same weekend that Jimmy died, but a year later. And I said, you've got to be joking. That's not going to happen. And I did spiritual warfare like you cannot believe. And then this was the Saturday, and the Monday, Jimmy would have been gone a year.
Wow.
And so it must have been about 2 weeks after that year, I get this phone call from a person I don't know. It was not phone call, it was a voice
note.
message. And I turned it on, and I only listened to the first sentence. Nothing more. I've got no idea what the rest of the message said. But it said to me, I'm a prophetess, and God has been wanting for the last 3 weeks, and which was exactly the period
you
that I was
felt, yeah.
having spiritual warfare. God said, I must contact you and tell you it's your time to die.
No.
Yes. And I stopped it just there. And immediately I answered her. And I said, I want you to know that that was Satan's plan for my life. But God's plan was for me to live. And I was shot exactly when you started to feel this. And but I'm alive, and I will live, and I will show forth the glory of God.
That is amazing, Pastor Mariana, how that just turned around. But I also want to, I think I just want to go back a little bit to, we were talking about the battles, but we were also talking about the greatest miracles that you have seen. You've been in ministry how many years now, Pastor Mariana?
Well, it's 52 years that I've been in ministry. I married Jimmy. We were married for 50 years.
That's
He's
amazing.
been gone for 2 years and 3 months now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even, okay. And so in these 52 years, what is a miracle that has really made an impression on you?
Sure, there's been so many,
So
Tia.
many.
So many. I think the miracles, I've seen the healing miracles. I've seen Jimmy being healed so miraculously.
Oh, yes.
You
And
know,
that
he
you also
had,
talk about in your book.
I do. We had that stroke, and I mean, it was a big stroke. It was
I
at the
never knew that
base
Pastor
of his
Jimmy had a
skull.
stroke. How old was he?
He was 40, probably about 42, and it was a platelet clot. They said, the doctor says it's very seldom happens, but 3 platelets had kind of stuck together and it formed a clot. And they said that it's unexplainable. I
Yeah.
believe that was a Satan's plan to take him out there.
But in that moment, you began to pray.
I did. And the lady next to me went totally berserk. I mean, she was so hysterical.
Because you were doing house visitation, were you?
Yes, yes. And, but I knew, but you know, when you get to the place when you know that God is God, and that with Him, actually nothing's impossible. I don't have to fear when that happens. I can take authority over it. And Satan has to bow his knee when I understand my authority.
Satan has to bow his knee.
He's got to bow his knee. And so I came against the spirit of death. You know, I'm not going to go into the details. It wasn't so pretty. But I came against that spirit of death. And you know that actually, the doctor could not believe it. And he was supposed to be on medication for forever after that. And he took it for 2 weeks and he never took it again.
Wow, but
And
that is Pastor Jimmy.
That's him.
Well, before we continue with some more stories, I'm going to just ask the production team to show us just the first photo. We've loaded a few photos just to show you. A lot of the people watching probably don't know Pastor Jimmy because they know Pastor Richard. But here we have a photo. Pastor Mariana, tell us about this photo.
There's my man. I don't quite know where it was taken. It was probably here on the beach somewhere. But, you know, Jimmy... it was actually quite the romantic, and his love language was touch, and he loved an affirmation. He was an affirmation junkie, and
what was the most romantic thing that he has ever done for you?
oh, he's
Pastor
done so
Mariana?
many, but he would kind of do things like. He'd put a ring. I think one of our anniversaries, he took me to a game lodge, and he put a ring in a champagne glass, and you know, and then you know.
Oh, that's so sweet.
You know, actually, it isn't this one. It's the one I wear most times, but.
Dion Bender saying there looks like Meisenberg.
Meisenberg, yes, zeker
Meisenberg.
reg, ja. Yes,
And this one, Pastor
there,
Mariana.
oh my word, there we were in Israel, and yeah, that was our first, and I know there are quite a few of the people in our church, like Kathy Stewart, and who else that's still here, who was on that trip with us. We took a trip, we took it over, you know, and we had a fantastic time. Yeah, and that's when we were young. And another life, another time, another day.
Was Richard already, did you have Richard by then?
He was probably, he didn't go with you most. He did go later on, but he must have been about that stage, about 7. I think he stayed with his granny.
Okay. And here we have Richard, Pastor Richard.
There we go. Look at my handsome young man there.
Who is now our senior pastor. And can we have the next photo? Now, this is what I want to talk about a bit as well. Who are these people, lovely people with you, Pastor Mariana, in this photo?
This is the Van der Westhuizen family. Mr. Rudolph van der Westhuizen on the right is my eldest brother. He is now 83.
Okay.
And then Johan has gone to be with the Lord. And that's Louise, my sister, who was my partner in crime at home when the car went into my house. And we were the closest together.
Okay, but I think when I started reading the book, you actually spoke about your siblings quite a bit because there was a miracle to your birth.
Yeah. Now, those two boys, my brother, the eldest brother, is 8 years older than I am. The younger one, 7. They were 11 months apart. So they were very close.
And your parents weren't necessarily going to have more children.
No, they weren't. They were actually they were born again in Cape Town, and then my dad was constant. He was just an ordinary signalman on the railway, and those days the railways would transfer you from signal box to signal box, and we were poor. We were really poor, so they transferred us, my brothers and my mom, and to Beaufort West. And but God spoke to them when they got saved and said, your family's not finished.
Wow.
I want you to have more children. And so I was born in Beaufort West. And I was 4 when I left there. So my first 4 years were in Beaufort West.
And you were dedicated to the Lord.
I was. At birth, my mom was on fire for God in Beaufort West. She really was sold out. And when she took me in her arms, she said, God, I give this little girl. And my dad came in, but they immediately together, they gave me to the Lord.
But in those years, you didn't speak about those kinds of things. You didn't know about that until much later.
No,
but your brothers also weren't aware that they were going to have a sister.
But don't you? I was funny enough. I was reading the other day about somebody who was in Auschwitz, whose parents were, and nobody talked about what happened. That generation, they didn't talk. They were the silent generation. They never told you anything that happened in their childhood.
I did enjoy. I actually had tears in my eyes, I must be honest, when I read the story about your father and the roses and how he would come and tend your garden, and that we hear so often of Pastor Jimmy's story and Smith's Wigglesworth and that history, but it's not often that we know about have heard about your family and there was great sadness in your family as well.
Tremendous sadness,
and you've had to break a lot of sort of. Or just forge a different path.
I did. I had to. But I watched my dad. And I think, my dad was probably one of the most stable people anybody could have known. He worked.
He was very hardworking.
Theo, he'd work 16 hours on a shift to get food on the table for us. And so he'd come home and he would still do all the house chores, the maintenance, the garden. He would do that. He'd sleep often 2 hours a day. But the one thing that I wanted to say is that he'd come home at 10 after he'd knock off at 10, so get home by 11:30, 10. 11 o'clock, I would find my father eating a warmed up dinner with his Bible next to him. Praying at the end of every day. He never missed a day.
But the situation with your mother was a little bit different from that. Although she was on fire, she had a very hard life.
Yeah, my mom she got hurt and she did what many people do. They get hurt in church and they quit. And then they retrogress. The things that they didn't deal with in first, deal with them at the end. And yes, my mom never talked about the fact that she walked in at the age of 11 to her mother having taken arsenic.
I didn't know that. I mean, arsenic, that's not readily available.
It was rat poison. It was in rat poison. Yeah, she drank a bottle of rat poison.
And your mother then had to deal with that trauma.
And this is the thing, when we she had come out of a really good home, actually, a really good home. But her father had turned to alcohol. And her mother had run away with her 2 younger ones. And so it was 100 years ago at COVID. It was ridiculous. I suddenly relived my grandmother's life.
Yes. Because everything closed down. Her business closed down and everything because
Well, she had a boutique hotel, Smart Place, and it went bankrupt because there was nobody coming.
And she saw no hope, no future.
No hope, and she was going to have to go back to
her
the
husband.
abuse.
And then your mother then had to sort of at 11 years old become like a mother.
She was the mother to her 2
siblings.
younger siblings. She used to do their washing, their ironing, she cooked their food, she would do their homework with them, and she had to see to herself.
And so when she had you, she was determined that you would have a different life.
Very, very. No, she wanted to give us the best that she possibly could.
So let's go.
And
from
she was a
that,
lady.
yeah?
She was a real lady.
Oh, wow. And then now let's go a bit further to meeting Pastor Jimmy, the romance of it. How did you meet?
Well, he came to visit my sister, who'd got really on fire for God. She was a school kid, man, and she'd gotten fire for God in Johannesburg, met this boyfriend, and so she was going to come back and find the church. And the same church.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that there was an English church up the road because we were English at home, although we were pretty Afrikaans too, but we'd gone to an English school. And there was this English church up the road, and because my sister is one determined young lady. And when she wants to do something, she'll do it.
And so you came home one day and there was this young pastor and his sister.
Dorothy.
Oh, Pastor Dorothy.
Yes.
Visiting your sister.
That's
Louise.
correct, yeah.
And then from there, nothing?
And then, we fought a lot about doctrine because I was very Baptist.
Okay.
So he'd visit her all the time, visit her all the time. But then we'd end up talking.
Okay.
So it was quite strange. But then invited me to this. You know how we used to have to sell tickets for the next big event. Well, he was having a big event in Cape Town at a restaurant, and it was an outreach to business people, to unchurched people, to everybody else, because it was the start of the charismatic move, when people were getting full of the Spirit in the Anglican church.
Speaking in tongues for the first time.
Yeah, getting thoroughly sozzled in God instead of getting drunk with wine.
And why did you decide to attend?
Well, he got me to go to the restaurant first, to that function.
Okay.
Man was hysterically funny. He was a priest, and he was funny. He was really funny. And he would act it all out, and he was acting out how he got saved. And then God spoke to him about his alcohol and how he took the whole procession, talked about the procession to the bathroom and him pouring out all the
alcohol.
And, it was like a breath of fresh air.
Okay, something completely different.
Totally different. And so I made my mind, okay, I'm going to listen to this guy on Sunday as well.
And then what happened?
And then God got hold of me at that meeting, because I had a touch from God earlier on. And I had kind of put it aside. And then that night, God got hold of me. And I said, God, whatever you want for my life, I surrender tonight completely to whatever my future has to be. And very shortly after that, Jimmy asked me to go out with him, and the rest is history.
And that was 50 years of marriage. 50 years.
50 years of marriage. It was a really crazy. I'd never had one boring day.
50 years of marriage, there must be something that, or quite a few things to take away from that. But if you should have to share three things that you've taken away that you would say to anybody who's getting married or who is married, having been married for 50 years, what would that be?
I think from the start, there's only one, abuse. Well, it's definitely, but being unfaithful. But otherwise, when you get married, you get married. And you get over yourself.
Ah.
And there's times when you're going to love somebody. And there's times you're not going to like them.
Okay.
But you'll still love them. You see, love is not an emotion. It's a choice. And there's times in marriage that we choose to love.
Because you see the worst and the best.
You see each other, you see another world that you never knew existed.
And
But when
Yeah.
you're committed to marriage, no matter what happens, you never, the thought of divorce never crosses your brain. It just doesn't. On either side, but it has to be a commitment from both sides. And that's why the Bible says don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever.
Okay. Now, being in ministry for so long, Pastor Mariana, what do you think people don't really know about behind the scenes?
Ministry is not, it's not easy. I know you feel like people think, well, God is just changing. I often say God doesn't play chess with us. God's joined me to this church now, but now he's leading me to that one, and then he's leading me to that one. But the truth is that you form relationships with people. For me, I found the hardest thing in ministry is breaking relationships. And also, those things are hard. But I must admit, I love ministry. I love
But you didn't
being
start
with
that way,
people.
because I think when you started out, you said to Pastor Jimmy, you were never going to be
I
a
would never be
pastor's
on a
wife.
platform.
Never on a platform.
Never on a platform. No, never on a platform. I was never going to preach. But I said, whatever you need me to do, I'm going to be there with you. And so from the beginning, I did support him as far as visitation, as far as
And
building.
visitation, I mean, that was standard. I mean, you
It
would
was
every
all we ever
day
did,
pack up your
yeah.
baby and go and visit one house
Yeah,
after the
yeah.
next.
And I think that all my whole life, I've wanted to see the Church of God built. I want a strong church, a stable church. And so in the background, I'll be doing the ministry. I've been secretary. I've been chief bottle washer, dishwasher. I've been caterer. I've been a children's worker. I have anything you want to do. I actually started it. I did it. And why? Because I'm passionate about the local church.
Two things we can't finish the interview without talking, and that is number one, your health and the operations you've had, and number two, Project Hope, because that was a big thing as well.
was.
So tell us about your health, that journey, because there was such a revelation for me in what you spoke about, that there's something small wrong,
Yeah.
and you just leave it because you're just coping. And you're just coping. And so we do that in a lot of areas of our life. We've got an offense, or we've got a hurt, we hurt somewhere, but we just keep going. And we say, I can cope with this on my own, I'm just going. And you had a very physical experience with that.
Absolutely. I was born with a knock knee, and I thought it was fine. It's the way you're born. I thought it was very normal, but it wasn't. And it was because I have very soft joints.
Okay.
And so this knee was already going in when I was a child. But it didn't worry me. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been very, very active my whole life. And slowly it slid in. And God spoke to me very strongly, because that was like a beginning of a domino effect in my body, because it didn't deal with that that happened. Then my foot went, and
You
then
actually broke your foot.
I broke my foot, and I've had 3 foot operations on it. So I've had 7 operations in 7 years. And if I'd only dealt with the problem in the beginning, that knee, but I was doing fine. It's fine. I can handle this. I'm walking. I'm fine. I'm just, you know. And if I dealt with it, probably 30 years ago,
Yeah.
I would not have gone through all the stuff I've gone through.
I think
And so
that's
God
like
taught
relationships.
me lessons
Yeah.
in that. God taught me lessons in that horrible season. And you know what? What is this? It's a journey through my life, and it's telling how the lessons God taught me in the
I
whole
loved it
process.
because we're discussing a few things now, but there's no way to get a whole book across to the audience.
And I want
think
you to know, I was thinking, I don't even, there's a lot I left out, but I'm not going to write another book.
why circles of grace?
Because as I came towards the end, I saw how something would start and go right around a circle, and it would come back to what happened. Like with my birth,
Okay.
with forgiveness. It started, that circle with forgiveness and my dad ending there, but it started at one point and it ended with another completely different situation, but the same principle applied.
It makes me think of being kicked out of the door, leaving the denomination,
Yes.
losing everything, and it coming full circle to where you're invited back to that same denomination.
That was one of the circles.
And seeing the victory and having the
Yes.
victory in that.
And every time it was a full circle victory. It started in what seemed like it was going to be a disaster. And God took it right around and He worked it for good.
Just a quick mention of Project Hope,
Yeah.
because a lot of people don't know that you are actually the visionary, the
Yeah.
founder, and we're always, and it's grown so much into 4 different outreaches every Sunday. They have Sunday school, they feed the children, there's a homework club. Madge is doing an amazing job with it.
She
But
is.
it started in your heart.
It started here on the car park. We needed an answer. We had children that couldn't
You were
come
busing
in.
people in,
And the
right?
children, they would been on the bus for an hour
From the northern area.
from where Pastor Fred's church is
Yeah.
today. And can you imagine what those kids were like? They were,
All that pent up energy.
it was terrible. And so I felt that they were beautiful kids. And God said to me, what are you doing? You're going to bring so many children here.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of children out there. And He put the whole picture in my heart. And the grace is that my team that were here, because I was running the children's church at that point, they actually, a lot of them were from that area. And they got it. They were so excited. And then God, by His grace, raised up an excellent team here. And it started on the oh my word, we laugh because some of the people that were in my life those days have actually come back into my life, and we were talking about the piles of beans.
Tell us about this diet bean.
You know what? I'd seen it. It was lupin beans.
Lupin beans.
It's
And people would drink these to lose weight. Did it
Yeah.
work? But we don't want to sell that now. But it worked?
It did work.
Oh.
And so I had some amazing, the Lord gave me the most amazing people to sell it. And I
You
made,
had all these agents selling these beans.
you've got to understand, 25,000 Rand was a lot of money those days. I had that amount of money to put into the bank to start Project Hope because
have
we
these
didn't have
outreaches,
money in the local church. So I said, well, then God's going to have to give it to me. And he gave me this idea. I mean, the miracles of Project Hope are unbelievable. You know, getting on a I don't know about computers, but I'd heard that if you get on a website, you can actually ask questions. I don't know anything about it, but I get on the website and ask a question. And immediately there's a man sitting, waiting on New York airport to catch a plane to South Africa. And he says, I'm David Cushworth. I do exactly what you're wanting. How can I help?
And there a journey begins. And that's also in the book. It's like the evangelism vehicle that you used and the characters that everybody dressed up as. And it was just going out and doing evangelism, something we don't often see anymore.
No. And we need to get back.
Okay, yeah, we do. I just want the team to show us one more photo. So this is Pastor Johnny Grobler and Pastor Jimmy and you. And what's happening in this photo?
We were at their church, actually, and we had a time together. We were such comfortable friends.
Oh, that's lovely.
And, you know, in the ministries, can I just say, ministry can be very lonely because you're up here and everybody's having fun around here, but they actually don't include you in a funny sense.
I think it's because you're put on a pedestal as well,
Yeah,
and they almost feel like they have to be perfect if they invite you.
Yeah, but anyway, and they were great friends. So a lot of our friends were ministry friends, and they were great friends.
And I see here Kathy Stewart saying we were asked to contribute 20 Rand per month to start Project Hope.
There we go. And you did that. I think we must make another call for people to start, but they can put it up to 200 now.
Absolutely. Now, Pastor Mariana, I can hear your voice as well. You've been speaking and telling us all of these wonderful stories. So I just want to bring it to a close almost, unless somebody has a question and they want to pop it into the comments about the book. I just want to say that only 3 people have actually read the book. Myself and Helena and Helena's mom checking the book. And all 3 of us have said we want to buy a copy because you laugh and you cry and you just feel so inspired and encouraged after reading it.
I loved Helena. Did you hear Helena's testimony this morning?
No, I didn't. No.
Helena came and she said to me, I need to give a testimony after she'd gone through a challenging situation at work.
Okay.
That week, it was the week before last. Yeah. And but the book was lying in her box. Yeah. And she decided, and somebody said to her, take the person to court, and I don't know what the lawyers, and there was it was an ugly business. And then she read my book. And the one thing I've always done, I've put peace in the middle of a situation. Yes. And I've allowed God to work it out. And I've actually laughed. That's why, I do laugh.
You actually put what you say to God in the book. You just put your little notes of what you said to God in that moment.
Yes. And I do. And so that's what, when the car went into my house, I said that to my neighbor. And she couldn't believe, it absolutely blew her mind that I could be so peaceful and laugh about it. And God has turned it around. It's been amazing how God has turned it all around.
And so for Helena this morning.
So that's also in the book.
So she really.
And then she read the book. And she said, I make a decision now to take a Mariana moment. And I'm going to put peace in the middle of the situation. And I'm going to let God work it out. And within 24 hours, that whole thing turned around.
That's amazing. And I think that's the thing. God is so good. And in your book, that comes through so often that no matter the challenge, it might seem impossible.
It does.
And it might seem unfair, and it is unfair. But God turns it around.
Yeah, and it depends on me. It depends on my attitude. But I think, as I said right at the beginning, I thank God that when as a woman in her 30s, I had a revelation that actually God's not an angry God. God is a daddy father. And I saw how my own daddy, maybe it was a good thing for me, because I had a daddy that would do anything for me. How he walked that last, he was dying. Nobody could believe that this man could have walked for that long time. But he had to come and tell me that I have to forgive. I've got to live a life of forgiveness. And you know, that's the thing that I Tia, and I want to say to everyone out there, what is forgiveness? It's living with an attitude of forgiveness. That the minute the offense comes, it's something you either take or you reject. Or you don't take it. I don't have to take offense. It's something, years ago, I've often said it from the pulpit, but I'll say it again. A guy called Kent, he said, when somebody spits on you, what do? They make you wet. They don't offend you. You make yourself offended.
That's true. That's true.
And so we have got to decide, how do I react to life? And I've had a crazy life. I must admit, I don't like doing life on my own.
Okay.
But I've had to make peace with it. And I've also not going to be anybody's problem. And so I have to, even in this situation, but I've watched God. And I've told that, I've watched God come through in just the most amazing way. He just every day, I just say, wow, God.
So for people wanting to read this book, or wanting to, because this is your story, it's
my
your side of
story.
the coin. It's 50 years of marriage, 52 and a half years of ministry. It is public battle. It is going through personal battles. It is going through, and your childhood and what
Yeah.
came. What do you want? You know, you have this book. It's called Circles of Grace. What is the one thing you want people to take away? Because we've spoken about that now, but
Yeah.
what is the one thing? Is it forgiveness?
I think, well, it's many things, but the one thing I think I want them to take away is the fact that they loved.
Okay.
And no matter where they've come from, they're loved. And therefore, because I know I'm loved, I can forgive. Because I know I'm loved. I don't have to be worried about tomorrow. I don't have to be worried about finances. I can give my life. And it's just giving a life away and doing what God wants you to do. Because in the end, you're going to be blessed.
How
And
do you know
I
what
hope
God-
it wants. I hope, and you that everybody that reads this is going to go, "Shoo, that was amazing. I feel like I can live again."
I wanted to ask you, so you said doing what God wants you to do. How have you known in your life what it is that God wants you to do?
Well, it was with writing this book, I wouldn't have done it. It's not me. It's not me even putting myself out here, but not me sitting here, actually. But
Sarah Kate. Sarah Kate saying, put peace in the middle of the situation. I'm so encouraged. Really want to read this book. And we've got Edith saying, you are one very special lady, Pastor Mariana. And Mart saying, I'm so inspired, been asking God how to serve him with my love of children and serving, but I see myself in you, Pastor Mariana. I'm so grateful that our journey met.
And that Jenny Nell that's there,
Yes.
she's suddenly back in my life. And she
And
was
Elise,
there
yeah?
when Richard was a little boy. She was one. She would babysit him sometimes.
I see Pastor Elise saying, jy's jou pa se Karoo blom.
Ek was my pa se Karoo blom. It is waar. That's exactly what he'd call me. And so I think, when we know we're loved, we can go. And I really have tried. I'm not negative. I am an optimist. I refuse to be negative. And I refuse to see lack. I just refuse. And so when we refuse to see lack, we expect abundance. And you know what? What we expect is what we attract. And
You like to say that where your energy, where your focus is,
goes,
that
your
is,
energy goes.
yes, and then that's what you get more
Yeah.
of.
But you see, Theo, when I'm focusing on getting, and I'm thinking, uh, uh, when we lost everything, it didn't worry me, because my problem, my main focus was we needed a church. We needed we needed to look after the flock. We needed to the people. The people were the important part. And if I never got a house again, it wasn't a problem. You know, I'm not materialistic. Believe it or not, I really am not. And then I looked at my house the other day, and since Jimmy, my husband's gone, the craziness of life has made my house become better and better, and I feel like I stay in garden, a beautiful garden all of a sudden, and I look at it all and I go, okay, God, you see, when you look after his house, he says, I look after yours.
So, Pastor Mariana, as we just wrap this up, are there any last words you want to share with anybody about Circles of Grace, your book, and just the general message? Any last words?
When I wrote this book, I said, God told me to write it. And I got that message, and from Jan Pater, and I don't live my life by prophecy, by the way.
Okay.
I live my life by the word. But Jan's prophecy, Jan had been a prophet in our life way back, and she prophesied that what was going to happen with the denomination. It was exactly like it was. And we actually not accepting that prophecy. It was, and then it happened. And so, and then she said to me, in 2016, you will write this book and you will not let it go.
And that is why we have
And
Circles of Grace.
so I heard this, and you will not let it go.
Yes.
Kept that, went round and round the book.
Well, I am just very grateful that I could read it. I could be one of the first people
Yeah.
to read it.
Thank you, Tia.
And I was very encouraged, and I will be buying my own copy as well.
No, you won't.
And
I'll give it to you.
And I see Marianne saying that she would love to buy a copy. Now, have a look on our page. There will be a pre-order form on our page, and we'll put a post up right after this as
Yeah.
well, and we'll put it up just so that you can place your order. And it should be done in about 2 or 3 weeks. I think it should come from the publishers, and it's been quite a journey getting it done and completed and edited and everything. And it's been a wonderful journey. And everybody who has had a look at it has been moved and touched and wants a copy. Like, want my own one. And so thank you so much. And Pastor Mariana, thank you for sharing with us tonight what is in the book and what we can look forward to in reading it.
Well, I trust, I trust that this read's actually going to encourage you.
Yeah.
I want you to not look at the battle. I want you to see the victory. Because you cannot have a victory without a battle. You have to go through a battle to see a victory.
Yeah.
And so I wanted you all to expect big victories in your life. Not see the problem, not see the situation you're in, and in your marriage and in everything. That you're actually going to see, God, you can do this. That's the God I serve. And that when you finish with it, you read it again, because it'll actually put some principles in your life that I trust are going to hold you for the rest of your life, that held mine.
Yeah.
And I'm 75.
A beautiful 75.
And I am thanking God every day for a wonderful gratitude. I'm so grateful for my life. I've lived a big life, a different life, a challenging but blessed life. And I'm very grateful to the day that I met Pastor Jimmy Crompton and the journey I went on with him. It was wonderful. And I miss him, but I know where he is.
Absolutely.
And we'll see each other again.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Pastor Mariana, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And thank you, everybody who joined us online to share in this beautiful story. And we hope that you'll purchase a copy of the book. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. God bless you.
Thank